It's Paul Marsh, and I'm delighted to be joined by the director of Red Sonja, MJ Bassett. MJ, thank you so much for joining me.
You're very welcome, Paul. It's lovely to be here.
Now, let's pretend we live in a world where nobody knows anything about Red Sonja, nobody's seen the movies, read the comic books, or anything else like that.
Oh
Tell
my
us what
goodness.
we can expect from this film.
Wow. So Red Sonja is I call it a heroic fantasy adventure movie. Lives in that genre space, a little bit like Lord of the Rings, that kind of world. It's about a young woman who has been orphaned and has spent her life alone in the forest, surviving, wishing that she could find her destroyed tribe and to find her family again. She is winkled out of the forest when she realizes poachers have come and have started destroying the forest, killing the animals, cutting the forest trees down, a place that she feels like she wants to protect. She ventures into the world to discover that an evil emperor dragon is using the world's resources in a way that she doesn't think is the right thing to do. So she goes and starts the fight. Unfortunately, she gets captured, enslaved, taken to the Damnati arena, which is essentially the gladiators arena, and forced to fight. And from there, she makes a plan to turn it around and get the bad guy. So it's a movie with sword fights and monsters. It's got cyclopses and it's got heart and humor and empathy and love and spectacular visuals. And at the end of the day, it's about empathy and love, I think.
I also think that animals play a huge part in the movie. Is obviously you have a huge love of animals yourself. Is that why they feature? I know some of the animals that feature in Red Sonja aren't necessarily from this earth, but they do feature heavily in the film.
It's true. I mean, it's a fantasy movie, so I gave me an excuse to sort of put some fantastical creatures in there. But yeah, my background, my deep background from when I was young is I ran wildlife hospitals. I wanted to be a wildlife vet. I used to be on television in the UK a very long time ago, hosting science and nature programs before I changed my life, became a filmmaker, and moved to America for a few years. And this Sonia was an opportunity for me to tell a kind of environmentally aware story wrapped up in a exciting action adventure picture in the fantasy. So the creatures, for instance, there's some creatures at the beginning called Phantotheriums, they're called fantasy theriums, but in the history of mammals in paleontology, there were lots of Baluchitheriums and Bornitheriums and creatures like that existed. So I thought, I'll just make up one of those.
I like that.
Cyclopses obviously weren't real, but the history of the Cyclops as a fantasy creature, if you look at the skull of an elephant, it looks like it's a giant human skull with a single eye, because where the trunk comes out, it looks like an eye socket. But that's where Cyclopses come from. So I just thought I'll use some of those things that I know about and love. And I adore fantasy movies. Fantasy films are the reason I became a filmmaker. I made a movie called Solomon Kane about 10 years ago, which was darker fantasy
Yeah.
based on Robert E. Howard, who created Conan, and who also came up with the original idea for a Red Sonja character. So I'm sort of familiar with that world anyway. And then when Sonja, she got published in a comic book form in the 1970s by Marvel and has been in publication pretty much for the last 40 years as this warrior barbarian woman who wears a chainmail bikini into battle. So she's always been this kind of male gaze fantasy character of what a warrior woman in fantasy should be. And then they made a movie of it in 1985 with Brigitte Nielsen and Arnold Schwarzenegger. So her antecedents are all there. But when I got the project, I was like, I know what I want to do with this. It's important to me to make something which is not just a male fantasy about, but it also works for young women, particularly a character who is empowered. But there's no sexual politics in it. I don't think I even mentioned that she's a woman. It's just she's a person in the world, which is kind of what I want things to be like. Obviously I don't make things without my own political agenda and my own aesthetic and my own loves and passions. And it's all in there. But Sonja's this kind of accessible, slightly violent fantasy adventure picture.
Well, I was going to ask about that because obviously, like you say, in the comics, Red Sonja is a 6-foot warrior and obviously played by Brigitte Nielsen in the 1985 film. Matilda Lutz is maybe a little bit more normal looking. You could have gone, I mean, there are plenty of actresses that have come like from the world of UFC and WWE and various other, big, strong fighting women that you
Yes.
could have cast. Was there a reason why you decided to go for Matilda Lutz?
There was, and yes, I completely looked at it. I mean, I did, I really did, because I'm a UFC fan, right? So I looked at all these women and I thought, yes, that physical power is really important. And but at the end of the day, I didn't think the physical power was important as what the acting ability and that humanity. Now, Matilda, I mean, she's 5'8", 5'9". She's not tiny at all, but she's beautiful. She's a great actress. She's Italian, so she's a slightly European sensibility. And she made a movie called Revenge,
She
where
did,
I
yeah.
watched her in that, and I thought, oh, there's some ferocity and power
Mm.
here. There's anger and all the things that I think I want to have Sonja feel at some point. But at the very end of the day, what I wanted is for Sonja as a person to be somebody who cares. Right? So there's like the end, there's some big spectacular battle sequences, and she gets pretty brutal. But at the very end of the day, when it comes to the standoff with the bad villain, played by Robert Sheehan, fantastic young Irish actor who does an amazing job of giving Emperor Dragon's agenda some real truth to it. It's like Thanos in the Marvel movies. He's not wrong. He's just going about it in a bad way. So when Matilda's character confronts him at the end, I wanted someone who could really give me that warmth and that love and that compassion and not just go, I'm going to chop your head off. So the UFC girls, there's some actually very good young actresses, potentially good actresses in that group of people. But when I did my thing, I thought Matilda is the place to go with this because she much more reflects me now. And I think ultimately you do make movies about yourself.
This movie has gone through many, 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 many iterations over the years, gone through many
Yeah.
rewrites, many directors,
Yeah.
many actresses, many, 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 all the way through.
Yes.
How long have you been involved and how much were you involved with regards to the casting and bits and pieces like that?
So my involvement burnt very quickly once I was involved, but I've tracked it for years, for decades, in fact. So after I made my first fantasy movie, Solomon Kane, about 10 years ago, people said to me, "What do you want to do next?" And they assumed I wanted to do Conan.
Right.
Right now, I love Conan as a character, but I said, "No, no, I want to do Sonja." And they was like, "Why do you want to do Sonja?" Now, I'm a trans woman, and I hadn't come out at that point, so they just like, "Why the hell does this dude want to do Sonja?" It's like now because everybody understands.
Yes.
But at the time, they're like, "Yeah, we don't get it." And I drifted off into television. I did some more horror, and I really ended up specializing in action. But I would constantly track what was happening with Sonja, and it'd been in development for like 17 years. And I would watch it, and I watched a director get attached. So I remember Robert Rodriguez was going to do it, and I knew
Yes.
Robert a little bit. Robert was going to do it with Rose McGowan. Now, Robert's version would have been comic book, pure comic book, unrealistic, good-looking fantasy action venture.
Think
Lots of
Sin
slow.
City in that world, yeah.
Yeah, Sin City 300, slow motion, heads being chopped off, digital blood splattering, right? Now that's a version I would see. I have no beef with that. And then Robert dropped out and somebody else came in and Brian Singer was attached to some big budget thing. Another director. Then Joey Soloway, who was the creator of Transparent, got involved. And Tasha Hugh wrote the script with her. And Gail Simmons, who'd written some of the comics, the new iterations of the comics was helping as well. And that was great. And that looked like a good package. And then that started falling apart. And I knew the studio who was making a company called Millennium. They make the Expendables movies and the Hitman's Bodyguard. And they kind of, and the Has Fallen pictures. So they're a genre company. And I'd be meeting them about something else. And I kept saying, "Oh, what's happening with Sonja?" And they'd always go, "Oh, we're really excited. It's going to shoot next year." And the years would go by. And finally, I'd said to them one day, "Oh, what's happening with Sonja?" And they were like, "Oh, it's just not working out. We're going to look another direction." And I said, "Are you just going to offer it to me now then?" Right? Really, really ballsy. And all the executives kind of look. I said, "Listen, I'm the most qualified person you're going to meet. Right? I know low budget movies. I make fantasy. I'm incredibly good at action. I'm a trans woman. I'm as politically correct as you can find. I can do this thing, right? And I make accessible commercial movies. So just give it to me." And they called the next morning and said, "Were you serious?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "There's no money." I said, "Don't matter. I'll do whatever budget you've got." And it is a very low budget picture. So we need to be shooting soon. I said, "Great, send me the script that you've got." And I read the script. I went, "I don't like the script as it stands, but let me work on it so it becomes what I'm interested in. I can be shooting on the date you want to shoot." And so the great thing about Millennium is that for all the fact that it's taken a long time to come out, lots of editing backwards and forwards and 25 producers and all the stuff that normally happens with modern movies, they let me make the movie I wanted to make. I got on the set and they left me alone because I know how to make these things.
Yeah,
You know?
I think that really, really comes across as well.
Really?
Yeah, I believe so. I believe so. I think again, I know that we're desperately running out of time, and I could talk to you forever about this. But I think when you know the previous iterations of the movie, and like you say about Robert Rodriguez, I think this is very clear that this is the film that you wanted to make.
Yes, I think that's true. And I'd love to do the director's cut one day because there's a lot more film out there that I'd like to put in.
Right. Like I say, we don't have a lot of time. I'm aware of that. I've got 3 questions that I'm desperate to squeeze in. I know that you work with Arnold Schwarzenegger on Fubar, and I know you spoke to him about Red Sonja. Was post-production completely wrapped by the time you worked with him?
Yes. Well, yes, it was. I think we were doing some final mixing.
So there was nothing like if he said, "Oh, you know, this suggestion or that," there was nothing you could change.
No, Arnold was great because I met Arnold on Fubar. It's one of those moments where you go, "I've got to pinch myself. Is this a real moment where Arnold's FaceTiming me and we're talking?" And then I'd asked Arnold to be in Red Sonja. I'd written him a letter. I wrote a character for him, and I wrote him a letter saying, to his agent, and I'm doing this movie. I'd love you to play this character. And I got rejected. And he said, I'm only really interested in doing Conan in that world. And we couldn't put Conan in this Red Sonja movie for contractual reasons. But then when I met him, he's like, I really want to see the movie. I'm excited. And I showed him the trailer. And he goes, that looks amazing. And he invited me to take it to his screening room and show it to him. Now, I wasn't ready to show him at that point. And I've subsequently left America. And I'm not going back to America anytime soon. But Arnold and I texted a little bit. And I know he's going to watch the movie. And I'm very, very excited to show him. Because we talked about doing King Conan.
Yeah.
That was our thing. It was like, I said, he had a John Milius script he loved. I thought, I want to do your final movie, Arnold. I want to do King Conan to end your movie career on something which would be amazing. It's never going to happen.
Let's put positive thoughts out in the world. Let's not say that. Let's put these positive thoughts out into the world. You never know.
If you can manifest it for me, darling, I'll love you forever.
Right, you did mention that you obviously are very well known for directing TV. You've directed 4 episodes of Ash versus the Evil Dead, which I loved. You've directed 4 episodes of Power, which I absolutely love. I have to ask you, how is it directing a TV show versus a film?
Hold on. It's amazingly different, right? Because one of the things that you have to do in television is sort of subjugate your personality a tiny bit. Right? So when I do TV, I know I'm passing through just as a person being given a script to shoot in a certain way. Now, on the set, you're still the director, but there are writers and producers in the studio. So it becomes you almost have to hang your ego at the door. And anybody who knows me knows how hard that would be for me to do. Right? But you can do it. There's a much more collaborative element to television in the sense that if I'm just doing a couple of episodes of something which has been running for seasons, I come in and they go, okay, MJ, what are you going to do with this? Well, I like to do these shots on this kind of lens. And I go, well, we don't really use those kinds of lenses here. So I go, okay, what's the stencil which you work within? And that's super challenging. So when I'm doing television, I'll say to the producers, give me the episode that you don't think you can do.
Right. Okay.
That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that challenge. But you do Power, it's fantastic in the kind, Fubar, and I do Reacher. I did Terminal List, so I do a lot of television. I tend to get given the action stuff, which is great. I mean, I ran this show Strike Back for years in the UK, which is like still the benchmark for action television anywhere in the world, as far as I'm concerned. So there's nothing you can ask me to do that I either haven't done or I'm scared to try. And it's the greatest challenge ever. But it's very different with movies. It's like, you look at Red Sonja, I will get blamed for Red Sonja in every single capacity, whether it's good or bad. I'll get the credit and I'll get the blame.
Yeah.
In television, nobody would even know that I'm there in terms of credit.
Yeah.
Nobody says, "Oh, MJ Bassett did this episode." It's the showrunner who gets all the accolade.
Yes.
For good or ill. Features are still a director's medium, pretty much. Television is the writer's medium.
Just to finish off, because we are completely out of time and I'm amazed
Okay.
we haven't been kicked off yet. I'm very surprised. You lived in America. You're now back in Britain. I have to ask you, what did you miss about Britain when you were in LA? And what do you miss about LA now you're back in Britain?
Well, I'm only back in the UK for the last 3 weeks, so I'm still getting my English sea legs, shall we say? What did I miss? Oh, listen, what I missed about Britain. I mean, I did what everybody did. I was like, oh, let's go and live in Hollywood for a bit, and had a lovely house in the hills there. But I went to America not for that. I went to America because I came out as trans, and I needed to change my life and live on the beach in California for a bit and just become who I was. And I finished my journey, and I come back to England, leaving America because politically it doesn't accept me anymore. So there's a lot of unpleasantness about that. Coming back to the UK, and even though politically it's difficult for me still, it's a better place. What I missed about the UK was the history and the folklore and the mythology, the richness of this culture. Gosh, it's amazing. I never, that thread connected me forever. The folklore of this country, I live just outside Bath now, and just you stand in a landscape which has got 10,000 years of history and the beauty of it, and all the way through the kings from Julius Caesar landing on the shores of Britannia back in the day, 2,000 years of kings and queens, all the way through to what we have now. There's so few countries like it in the world, and I've traveled all over the world, and I love mythology and folklore, and the UK is rich in that and the traditions, and I would fight to the death to preserve those things because they matter. They matter to who we are.
This is why you're a better person than me, because after spending time in America, I missed a cup of tea. Um, this is why you're a much, much better person than me. MJ, it's been absolutely wonderful talking to you. Red Sonja is available on digital platforms on August 18th and on DVD and Blu-ray on the 8th of September. Have a wonderful day. I hope it is a massive success, and I hope that people love it.
Thank you, Paul. It's been such a pleasure.